Welcome to a love story that was supposed to be just a play. But then, real emotions stealthily entered the stage without anyone being able to stop them. If you're here, you're probably a hopeless romantic, or maybe just someone who loves a good love story with a twist. Either way, you're in the right place. Today, I'm sharing a story that starts with a lie, one tiny, harmless lie that slowly, unexpectedly, turns into something heartbreakingly real. Have you ever agreed to something just to make things easier? Like pretending to date someone to keep your nosy aunt off your back? Or showing up to a wedding with a fake boyfriend, just to prove you've moved on? That's exactly what our girl thought she was doing. A simple deal, a temporary fix, no feelings involved. Just rules, boundaries, and a strict time limit. But here's the thing about pretending to love someone. Sometimes your heart forgets it's just acting. So get comfy, grab your favorite drink, and let me tell you a story about fake kisses, real feelings, and the moment two people realize they've been lying to everyone except their own hearts. This is Fake Relationship Turn Real. Sophia Clark had always been a planner, whether it was her career, her fitness routine, or even the way she folded her clothes. Everything in her life had a purpose, a schedule, a neatly organized place. At 28, she had just secured a promotion at her marketing firm in San Francisco, an apartment that was all hers, and a life that was, well, exactly how she imagined it would be. Except for one thing. Her family was obsessed with her getting married. And, worse, they were starting to believe that Sophine's single status was some kind of personal rebellion against their values. Her mom had already staged countless casual conversations about the future, always asking her when she planned on meeting the right one, her dad. Well, he just sighed a lot and gave her that disappointed look, as though she was supposed to already have found the love of her life by the time she hit 30. But it wasn't the family pressure that was really pushing her to the edge. It was the wedding. Her ex, Adam, was getting married to someone else, someone younger, more confident, and certainly more suitable in her parents' eyes. Of course, they didn't know Adam was her ex. The wedding invitation arrived just like a slap in the face, and they wanted her to bring a date, a +1. The problem, Adam still had the power to hurt her. That breakup, the one that left her questioning every decision she'd ever made. Well, it had happened only a year ago, and she was still recovering. Showing up single, alone, would feel like losing. She couldn't let that happen. Not in front of her family, not in front of Adam. And that's when it hit her. She needed a date, fast. But not just any date. She needed someone who would be convincing. Someone who wouldn't embarrass her in front of her family. Someone who could play the role of the perfect boyfriend for an entire weekend. Someone who could make her look as though she had everything together. She was running out of options. And then, the last person she ever expected popped into her head. Sophia was still sitting in the cafe, staring at her phone, trying to figure out who she could possibly ask to be her fake boyfriend. She knew that the longer she thought about it, the more hopeless it seemed. That was when she heard a familiar voice. Well, if it isn't Miss Perfect herself. Sophia froze. She didn't even need to look up to know who it was. The voice, smug, confident, and just the tiniest bit condescending, belonged to none other than Max Jacobs. Max, her old college rival, the guy who never lost a debate, always had the last word, and somehow managed to make her feel like an amateur, no matter how hard she tried. They had crossed paths so many times in university, always in the same circles, competing for the same scholarships, the same internships. He always seemed to come out on top, and she always ended up feeling like she was chasing his shadow. Max had a knack for making everything seem effortless, especially when it came to his career. He was now a successful entrepreneur in the tech world, with his own startup in the heart of Silicon Valley. But it wasn't just his professional success that grated on Sophia, it was his cocky attitude. The way he could make her feel small without even trying. She forced a smile and looked up at him, hoping her face didn't betray the annoyance she was already feeling. "Max," she said, trying to keep her voice neutral, "I didn't expect to see you here." He slid into the seat across from her without waiting for an invitation, flashing that infuriating grin that had driven her crazy for years. "Well, you know, San Francisco isn't that big of a place. And I tend to frequent places where people know how to dress." His eyes flicked down to her outfit, clearly judging her choice of blouse and slacks. Sophia rolled her eyes, as if she cared about his opinion. "What do you want, Max?" she asked, already getting impatient. He leaned in slightly, his gaze sharpening. "I couldn't help but overhear you mumbling to yourself about finding a fake boyfriend. You really think I'm that desperate to hear about your personal problems?" He smirked. "Or maybe you just couldn't resist the idea of getting my attention." Sophia sighed. She wasn't in the mood for his usual antics, but there was something about his challenge that sparked an idea in her head. Maybe, just maybe, he was the answer to her problem. "Actually," she said, putting down her phone with renewed determination, "I need a favor." Max raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "A favor? From me?" He leaned back, crossing his arms. This should be good. Sophia took a deep breath. She was about to make a deal with the devil himself. "I need you to pretend to be my boyfriend for 3 days. My family expects me to bring someone to my sister's wedding, and I need you to act like we're in a serious relationship." Max's smile widened, but it wasn't the smug grin she was used to. It was a genuine, almost amused one. "Oh, this is rich," he said. "Let me guess, you can't handle showing up alone." Sophia fought the urge to roll her eyes again. But she nodded, knowing she had no other choice. Sophia felt a wave of frustration bubble up in her chest as she sat across from Max. She'd always known he was arrogant, but now it felt like she was sitting across from a professional at the art of making people uncomfortable. Max studied her with that smug expression, his eyebrows raised in amusement. "So, let me get this straight," he said, leaning back in his chair. "You're asking me, the guy you've been avoiding for years, to pretend to be your boyfriend for a wedding? A wedding where your family's gonna be all over you, questioning you, pushing you to get married next." Sophia let out a deep sigh, glancing out the window as if hoping for a miracle to arrive. She needed him, there was no other option. She had already considered calling a random guy from a dating app, but then what would she say when her mom asked how long they'd been together? And what if that random guy made her look even worse? "Look, Max," she said, meeting his gaze with a mixture of exasperation and desperation, "I don't have time for your games. I need a boyfriend, one who can convincingly act like we've been in a relationship for months. And you," she pointed at him, "you're the only person who's even remotely suitable." Max raised an eyebrow, his amusement still clear. "Suitable? You think I'm suitable for this kind of charade? You've got to be kidding me." Sophia's patience was wearing thin, but she knew she had to remain calm if she wanted to seal the deal. She took a breath, then leaned forward, lowering her voice. "I'm serious, Max. You owe me. Do you remember the marketing presentation we did together last year? You were running late and completely flaked on the slides. I had to cover for you in front of everyone. You promised you'd make it up to me, and this is me cashing in on that favor." Max was quiet for a moment. He always hated owing people anything. It was probably why he'd never gotten too close to anyone. The idea of having to rely on someone else made him uncomfortable. Still, there was a glint of something in his eyes, something that told Sophia he wasn't going to back out easily. Finally, he smirked and sat up straight. All right, fine, I'll help you. But I'm not doing this for free, and I'm definitely not doing it without some ground rules. Sophia stared at him, uncertain whether to be relieved or horrified by the deal. Ground rules? What are you talking about? Max leaned in, his voice dropping to a mock serious tone. Rule number 1. No acting like we're actually dating. We keep it strictly professional. We show up, smile, hold hands when necessary, but no kissing, no cuddling, none of that. He raised a finger. Rule number 2. You don't ask me to play the perfect boyfriend. I'm not going to pretend to be this ideal man your family wants. You want someone real, and that's me. Sophia raised an eyebrow, unsure if she liked the idea of real Max being on display. Fine, and what's rule number 3? Max grinned, his eyes twinkling with amusement. You're buying me dinner, every night, and I get to pick the place. Deal. Sophia thought about it for a second. He was right. She didn't have many options, and the dinner thing? That seemed like a small price to pay for saving her sanity and her reputation. Deal, she said, extending her hand across the table. Max shook her hand with an exaggerated flourish, leaning back in his chair as if he had just won a victory. I'm looking forward to this. Sophie, I can already tell this is going to be interesting. Sophia rolled her eyes, but couldn't suppress the small smile that tugged at her lips. Despite the ridiculousness of the whole thing, she couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over her. She had a plan now. She wasn't going to show up to her sister's wedding alone, not looking like a failure. And maybe, just maybe, she'd survive the weekend with her family's expectations intact. As they both stood up to leave, Max gave her one last glance. And Sophie? She turned to face him, a little confused. Let's make this really convincing. After all, I wouldn't want you to look bad in front of your family. Sophia couldn't help but let out a small, frustrated laugh. You're impossible, she muttered. Max just grinned. That's why you called me, right? The next few days were a whirlwind of awkwardness, laughter, and moments that made Sophia question her life choices. She'd agreed to this fake relationship under pressure, but she never expected it to get this complicated. Max, of course, made things infinitely worse, but then again, he also made it way more interesting than it had any right to be. It all started at her family's Sunday dinner, which was always a big deal full of her nosy aunts, uncles, and her grandmother, who had absolutely no filter. Sophia had warned Max about the chaos. It's going to be a lot of questions, she'd said as they arrived at her parents' house. I need you to be, well, convincing. Max, looking smug in his navy blue blazer, raised an eyebrow. I'm great at convincing people, he'd said, flashing a cocky grin. Watch and learn. Sophia shook her head, already regretting her decision, the first thing that went wrong. Max, in his infinite wisdom, decided to make an entrance. He walked in like he owned the place, straight up to her dad, and extended a hand with exaggerated formality. Mr. Clark, it's an honor to finally meet you, he said, shaking her father's hand like they were doing business. Her father looked taken aback for a moment, then laughed, clearly charmed by Max's over-the-top demeanor. Sophie's been talking about you, her dad said, eyes twinkling. You've got her completely wrapped around your finger, huh? Sophia nearly choked on her drink. Dad, she hissed, embarrassed. Max, however, just grinned. She's a tough one to crack, he said, winking at her. And just like that, he was in, winning over the family with his charm and a little bit of overconfidence. But things only got worse when dinner began. Her grandmother, sitting at the end of the table, narrowed her eyes at the two of them. So, Max, when's the wedding? She asked, without missing a beat. Sophia nearly spit out her wine. Grandma, she hissed, mortified, We've only been dating for 3 days. But Max, ever the performer, leaned in with a playful smile. We're keeping it quiet for now, he said, holding her hand under the table. Don't want to steal anyone's thunder? Her grandmother raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. Well, you know, Grandma said with a wink, I was married at your age. And look at me now, still going strong. She looked at Sophia. You could do worse. The next event on their agenda was Adam's wedding. A full-blown, over-the-top affair in a vineyard up in Napa Valley. Sophia had mentally prepared herself for the awkwardness of seeing her ex, but she wasn't prepared for Max's level of commitment to the performance. When they arrived at the venue, Max took one look at the ornate decorations and the fancy crowd and immediately started pretending they were royalty. He stood a little taller, his posture straighter, and he even waved at a few strangers as though he knew them. Hey, Max, Sophia said, embarrassed. We don't need to perform for these people. It's just a wedding. Max turned to her, looking utterly serious. Sophie, we've been dating for 3 days. You don't think we should give them a show? Sophia, resisting the urge to roll her eyes, sighed. She didn't realize he was this invested in the bit. When they walked into the reception hall, all eyes turned to them. Of course, that was when Max decided to play up the whole perfect couple act. He wrapped an arm around her waist, pulled her in close, and kissed her temple just long enough for people to notice. Sophia froze, heart racing. Was this a real kiss? Was she supposed to kiss him back? But before she could think too much about it, Max winked and led her toward the bar. He was having the time of his life. I think we nailed that entrance, he said with a smirk. They're totally buying it. Sophia couldn't help but laugh, despite herself. She couldn't remember the last time she had been this entertained by him. Later in the evening, while they were mingling with guests, an old friend of Adam's pulled Sophia aside. So, I have to ask, she said, raising an eyebrow. How long have you two been together? You seem so ... perfect. Sophia could feel the panic rising. She wasn't ready for this level of commitment. She needed to keep this fake relationship intact. But Max, always the smooth talker, stepped in. We've been seeing each other for a while now, he said smoothly, putting his arm around Sophia's shoulders. I'm just lucky to have her. Sophia couldn't believe it. She felt her heart skip a beat at the words. Was she lucky? Could she really pull this off without getting too attached? The last event they had to attend was the annual Harvest Festival in her hometown. It was small-town America at its finest, apple cider, hay rides, and a corn maze. Max, for all his city boy charm, was totally out of his element. At first, he was all for it until they reached the corn maze. This is ridiculous, he muttered, brushing away the stray corn stalks in his way. Who even designed this thing? It's like a giant puzzle without a solution. Sophia couldn't help but laugh. You're just mad because you don't know the way out, she teased, clearly enjoying his discomfort. Max's expression softened just a bit. Maybe I don't mind being lost, he admitted, looking at her with a little more warmth than usual. I wouldn't mind staying lost with you. Sophia's breath caught in her throat. For the first time, she saw a side of Max that wasn't just arrogant or sarcastic. He was real, and that terrified her. As the day went on, Sophia began to notice the little things. Max's dry humor was no longer as annoying as it used to be. In fact, it was kind of endearing. The way he effortlessly made her laugh, the way he was so good with her family. Sophia couldn't deny that she was starting to feel a connection she wasn't prepared for. At the end of the night, as they sat under a string of fairy lights at the festival, sipping warm cider, Max turned to her with a soft smile. You know, I didn't expect this to be fun, he said, almost as if he was surprised by his own admission. But I'm kind of glad we did this. Sophia felt a flutter in her chest. Was this the moment? Was she actually falling for him? She had to admit it, there was something more between them now than just a fake relationship. And maybe, just maybe, she was starting to want it to be real. It had been a few weeks since their fake relationship started. What was supposed to be a simple, temporary arrangement had spiraled into something much more complicated. The chemistry between Max and Sophia was undeniable, unsettlingly real, and neither of them could ignore it anymore. It was a warm evening at a small, local coffee shop. The kind of place that had mismatched chairs, an old record player softly spinning in the corner, and the smell of fresh pastries in the air. Max and Sophia sat at a corner table, surrounded by the low murmur of other patrons, their usual playful banter filling the space between sips of coffee. Max was talking about something trivial, something about a new project at work, but as he spoke, he didn't notice how his hand had slipped to the edge of the table, just close enough to touch Sophie's. She was listening intently, her gaze focused on him as he spoke. But for the first time, she wasn't just pretending to listen. She was feeling the moment. Her heart, unexpectedly, began to beat faster. It happened in an instant. Without thinking, she reached out, her fingers brushing lightly against his. There was no reason behind it, no grand gesture. It was just instinct, and when their fingers intertwined, it felt like nothing else mattered in that moment. Max froze, his words trailing off as he stared at their hands. He looked up at Sophia, and for a second, neither of them spoke, his expression softened. The distance that had always been there created by their fake relationship seemed to vanish in an instant. And then, without warning, Max leaned forward, his lips brushing lightly against hers. It was a soft kiss, almost hesitant, but it was real. No one was watching, no one was making demands. It was just the two of them, caught in something neither had planned for. For a moment, the world outside the coffee shop seemed to disappear. The bustling street, the laughter of other customers, none of it mattered. Only the feeling of Max's lips on hers. But as soon as the kiss ended, reality hit. The space between them felt like 1,000 miles again. Sophia's heart raced, her mind spinning. Was that real? Was that just a kiss, or something else entirely? Max pulled back first, breaking the silence. His eyes were wide, and there was an awkward tension between them that hadn't been there before. He didn't say anything, but his expression said it all. Sophia opened her mouth to speak, but stopped herself. What was there to say? What could she say? I am sorry, Max said, finally, running a hand through his hair. That shouldn't have happened. We're not supposed to. I didn't mean to make this complicated. Sophia's stomach twisted. She could feel her heart sinking. He was backing away already. Was it really that simple for him? Was it that easy for him to push her away after everything they'd been through? No, Sophia said, her voice a little more than a whisper. It's fine. She stopped herself, unsure of how to continue. It wasn't fine. She didn't know why, but something inside her told her that this moment meant more than she was willing to admit. She had started to care, and she was terrified. Max, clearly uncomfortable, stood up abruptly, his chair scraping across the floor. I think we need to take a step back, he said, his voice tight. I can't keep pretending like this isn't affecting me. Sophia watched him, her chest tightening. What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely audible. Max looked away, his gaze darting around the cafe as if he was searching for the right words. He was terrified, she could tell. The last thing he wanted was to get emotionally entangled. I mean this whole thing, Sophia, Max said, almost angrily. It's a fake relationship, and I don't do real feelings. I've been clear about that. You know that, right? Sophia nodded, her throat dry, as if the weight of his words had stolen all the air from her lungs. It hurt, more than she expected, and yet she understood. Max wasn't ready to let himself feel anything. He was scared. "I don't want to complicate things more," he added, backing away from her, as if every word was pushing them further apart. Sophia could only stare at him, her heart shattering with every second that passed. She had known this was a possibility. She had told herself to keep it light, to keep it easy, but now that it had happened, she wasn't sure she could let go. The next few days were filled with silence, no texts, no calls. Max had distanced himself, just as he said he would. Sophia, though, was left in a mess of confusion and heartache. She wanted to reach out, to fix this, but she didn't know how. Her mind kept replaying that kiss, over and over again. The way he held her hand, the way his lips had felt against hers. She had told herself it was just a kiss, that it was part of the act. But in her heart, she knew it was more than that. She had felt it, she had felt something real. And now, she was terrified of losing it, losing him. But Max ... he hadn't called, he hadn't even texted. The silence between them spoke louder than any words could. A week passed, and the tension in the air became unbearable. Sophia couldn't go on pretending she didn't care. But she couldn't bring herself to call him either. What if he didn't feel the same? What if it was all just a mistake? The final blow came when she saw him at a work event. Max, standing at the bar, laughing with his friends. He looked just as carefree as he had before. Everything had changed. And yet, the distance between them had never been more palpable. She walked over, trying to ignore the way her heart was racing. "Max," she said, her voice shaking slightly. He turned around, his face lighting up for a brief second before he caught himself, quickly returning to his usual, detached smile. "Sophia," he said, his voice cold. There it was, the wall he had built between them. "We need to talk," she said, her voice steady despite the hurt creeping in. Max sighed, looking away, then meeting her gaze with a seriousness that made her stomach drop. "I think we're both clear about what this was," he said, his words sharp. "It was just supposed to be a favor. It's over. No more pretending." Sophia felt her heart crumble. No more pretending. No more hope. "I get it," she said, her voice breaking. "But I don't think I can just walk away like it was nothing." Max's eyes softened for a fraction of a second before he quickly turned away. "You should, because it was nothing." And with that, he walked away, leaving her standing there, more broken than she had ever been. The cold winter wind cut through the busy streets of the city as Sophia stood on the corner, waiting for the light to change. It was one of those evenings when everything felt off and the world seemed just a little too loud, a little too empty. She'd tried to focus on work, on life, on anything that didn't remind her of him, but it had all been in vain. The quiet ache in her chest wouldn't go away. After the awkward exchange at the work event, after the silence that stretched between them like a chasm, she couldn't do it anymore. She couldn't pretend that it didn't matter. She couldn't pretend that the kiss, though soft, unspoken, words shared in the dimly lit coffee shop hadn't changed everything. She didn't know what she was doing, but she couldn't just stand there and watch their connection slip away. Not when she knew, deep down, that she didn't want to lose him. Max was sitting in his apartment, staring out at the city skyline. The Christmas lights twinkling on the streets below did nothing to ease the tension in his chest. He hadn't heard from Sophia since that night. His mind raced, going over there. Last conversation, how he'd pushed her away. He had told himself it was for the best, that he couldn't allow himself to feel something real. But now, the quiet moments, the empty spaces, felt unbearable. "Why am I doing this?" he thought, his hands gripping the edge of the window frame. He had tried to convince himself that it wasn't worth it, that it was just a fling, just another favor. But the truth was, the thought of her not being in his life made him feel like he was suffocating. He had to fix this. He didn't know how, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't let her go. Max found himself standing at the train station, the place where they had first met. He wasn't sure why, but this felt like the right spot. The cold air was biting, and the sound of trains whooshing by added a strange sense of urgency to the moment. He looked around, searching for her, feeling like a fool, but he knew this was the only way. Sophia wasn't sure what she was doing when she stepped off the bus at the same train station. She had always loved this place, the sense of possibility it brought, the idea that people were always moving, always going somewhere. She'd come here to clear her head, to think. And yet, standing there now, her heart racing, she knew she wasn't alone in her thoughts. She was here for him. She turned a corner, and there he was, Max. Their eyes met, and the world seemed to slow down. Neither of them said anything at first. They didn't need to. The tension was thick, like a thread between them, pulling them closer despite the distance they'd tried to create. Max took a step toward her, his breath catching in his throat. "Sophia," he said, his voice shaking slightly, "I can't do this anymore. I've been trying to pretend like it doesn't matter, but it does. You matter." Sophia's heart skipped a beat. She had expected him to back away again, to push her further out of his life. But instead, he was stepping forward, admitting what they both knew. "I'm sorry for how I acted. I didn't want to admit it to myself, but I've been lying to both of us. The truth is, I don't want this to end. I don't want to pretend anymore." Tears welled up in Sophine's eyes, a mix of relief and joy flooding her chest. She had wanted this, needed it, more than she realized. The fear that had kept her distant melted away as she took a step toward him, closing the gap between them. "Max," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "I felt it too. I was just scared. Scared of what this could mean, but I can't pretend either. I don't want to lose you." There, in the stillness of the station, with the hustle of the city around them, the two of them stood, finally facing the truth. No more pretending, no more games. They had come to this point because they couldn't fight the feelings anymore. What had started as a lie had become something real, something undeniable. Without thinking, Max reached out, his hand gently cupping her cheek. The touch was soft, careful, as if he was afraid that this moment would slip away if he wasn't careful. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. But she didn't. Instead, she closed the distance between them, her lips meeting his in a kiss that was real, unguarded, and full of all the emotions they had kept hidden for so long. The kiss was gentle at first, but then it deepened, both of them giving in to the feelings they had fought against. There were no cameras, no audience, no expectations, just the two of them, lost in the moment, realizing that they were finally where they were supposed to be. When they pulled away, they didn't need words. Their eyes spoke everything. They were together, finally. He took her hand in his thumb brushing over her skin as they stood there, taking in the reality of what had just happened. The world around them continued to move, but they were in their own little bubble, a moment frozen in time. So, Max started, a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "What now?" Sophia chuckled softly, a lightness filling her chest that hadn't been there before. "Let's see where this goes. For real," she said, her eyes sparkling with a new sense of hope. Max nodded, pulling her closer, and for the first time in what felt like forever, they both felt like they had found something real. Not a lie, not a favor, but something worth holding on to. And just like that, Sophia and Max's journey transformed from a simple, fake arrangement to something deeply real and beautiful. What began as a lie to people pretending for the sake of convenience soon became an undeniable connection that neither of them could deny. Their story teaches us that sometimes the most unexpected relationships can turn into the most meaningful ones. Life doesn't always go according to plan, but when we open our hearts to possibility, amazing things can happen. Throughout their story, we saw them face their fears, challenge their assumptions, and embrace something neither of them thought they were ready for. In the end, it wasn't about pretending anymore. It was about facing the truth of their feelings. How many times have we tried to hide from what we truly feel, just to avoid vulnerability? Are we willing to take the risk of being open to someone, even when we don't have all the answers? Can a fake relationship, born out of necessity or convenience, actually grow into something real? We all have our moments of hesitation, of doubt, but sometimes it's taking that first step toward honesty, toward real connection that leads us to where we belong. If you've enjoyed this story and found yourself reflecting on your own relationships, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming tales that explore love, vulnerability, and real connection. Leave a comment with your thoughts. What did you think of Sophia and Max's journey? Do you think a fake relationship can really turn into something real? Let's talk about it. Subscribe now to stay updated and be part of our community of storytellers who believe in the magic of real connections.